Good morning, Year 10s. This is our unseen poetry lesson that we can't do by Zoom, so I'm using my visualizer to talk to you like I would normally use on our paper, and then I'm going to move it to the paper. So, lots of paper. Let's start with the do now then. We're having a real lesson here. Get your pens out, get your lined paper out. We're going to have a do now, and I want you, as part of the do now, to go through the process that you will go through when you hit an unseen poem in the exam. So the first thing you will do is you will read the poem 3 times out loud in your head. And you will say, Miss, that sounds ridiculous. I can't do out loud in my head. In the beginning, you will read out loud in your head with your lips moving. Because when you read out loud in your head, it is different than just reading silently in your head. When you read out loud in your head, you hear the words in your ears or in your brain ears, and you can hear the assonance, you can hear the any of the alliteration and the hard k sounds and the fricative f sounds, and you feel your teeth moving, so therefore you see them more clearly. So you need to read Bright Star out loud in your head. To help you with this do now, I am going to read it out loud the first time. So you'll only need to read it 3 times, okay? So this is Bright Star by John Keats. Everybody got a copy? Everybody got their pens ready? Good. Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendor hung aloft the night and watching, with eternal lids apart, like nature's patient, sleepless eremite, the moving waters at their priest-like task of pure ablution round earth's human shores, or gazing on the new soft fallen mask of snow upon the mountain and the moors. No, yet still steadfast, still unchangeable, pillowed upon my fair love's ripening breast, to feel forever its soft fall and swell, awake forever in a sweet unrest. Still, still to hear her tender taken breath, and so live forever, or else swoon to death. All right, you see how when you read it out loud in your head, you will pause at the pauses, you will say the words. So take this time, I'm pausing the video, pause the video, read it now twice again in your head. You might find the words difficult, but I don't care, because everybody finds words difficult in poems. So do it. You done it? Okay. Right, you've read this now. You're sort of getting an idea of what it means, and then you hit the question. So usually I'd say read the question first, and that's fine, but sometimes with an unseen poem, it might scare you more than anything. So, especially with some of the words that you might not find very common. I mean, this is quite formal, flowery almost language. I know Keats is a 2nd generation romantic and is supposed to be using ordinary language, but his idea of ordinary language in the 1800s is very different to ours after the year 2000. So eremite, not such a common idea. Right, so the next thing I want you to do, which is what you will do when you hit an unseen poetry exam, is have a really good look at the question. I have written the question on the bottom. Have a good look at it. It says, how does the poet feel about the moon, and how does he present these feelings to the reader? So it is asking you to decide how the poet feels about the moon. So it's not bright star, let's talk about a star. It's bright star, you are the moon. So already we're getting an idea that actually the title is pretty significant. I have interpreted the mark scheme, which is incredibly long and complicated, and which starts out with a level 1 person saying, I barely wrote anything that Miss can mark, to actually I'm doing really well at this. It goes up to level 6, just like the other one, and this only goes up to 24 marks though. But I am essentially looking for the same things as I am in the comparative work that you've been doing in the power and conflict poetry. So my interpretations are, number 1, you must begin with a thesis and you must build the argument paragraph by paragraph until you finish with your conclusion. You must explore alternatives to your argument about why the poet wrote the poem. You must pick your references very carefully. So don't jump around, try and use everything. Make one point. Take apart one reference showing your point. And you must write about form, structure, and language. The and. If you want to get in the top bands, 6, and get a 7, 8, or 9 kind of mark, and you're getting between 22, is it? I think it might be 20. 21 and 24, you have to do all 3, no question. Okay? And when you look at quotations, you want to look at individual words and short phrases, not giant, long statements, full lines, 2 lines, all right? So that's what judicious means. It means you have to pick and choose. Right, so I'm not going to go any more into the mark scheme about that because that's going to scare you. But I'm going to give you my interpretations of the mark scheme, and I'm going to now take the next few lessons as we work through the mark scheme, practicing every point, so that you are incredibly practiced in it. And we'll do it on lots of different poems, so you'll get an exposure to lots of different poems as well. So today, we are going to come up with convincing arguments and thesis statements. A lot of you struggle with that. This will help you with your power and conflict poetry as well. So, once you've read the poem, and now you've read the question, I want you to write down in one sentence what you think the poet is saying about his feelings about the moon. And I want you to start by using this sentence. If you struggle, obviously don't worry about using this starting sentence if you don't struggle, but for those of you who do struggle, use this sentence. Let's hope it carries out. Right, see where it's yellow? In Bright Star, that's what the ... means, the poet describes his feelings that, or the poet describes his feelings about the moon, that. So that is what I expect you to be writing down right now. You will have noticed several things about this poem, and I'm now going to go through them, but I want you to write down your starting impression. Pause the video. While you do that, think about what he's actually saying about the moon, and then I'm going to take you through the poem to show you what I think he's saying about the moon, and I'm using my orange pen because that is what I always use when I talk about my thesis statement. So pause the video, write this down. I'm now putting the poem out. Okay, you have now written what you think it might mean. Now, I just want to show you, I'm going to show you a thesis statement that I wrote, and this is what we're going to aim for, okay? We are going to aim for a thesis statement that's no longer than this, and that's just because my writing is scratty and I had to rewrite parts of it, okay? So that, by the end of the lesson, is what we are aiming for. Bright Star. What might he be saying? So if you'd like to annotate your poem with your thesis ideas, then do it, because they don't tell you off for doing it. You can either list them or you can actually write on the poem itself, okay? So I've got ideas like, he's talking about it being bright, so this is an adjective. Now that's not going to be good enough, is it? But it's an adjective describing either light or intelligence. So it can be taken in 2 ways. And maybe we're then talking about how this, and he then talks about it being a star, which is a metaphor for how he feels about it. Right, so I'm always going to use my writer's technique so that you get more practiced in knowing how to spot them. Obviously, a moon is not a star. A moon is another orbiting planety thing, but it's not a star. It has no light in and of itself. So therefore, we've got a metaphor here in showing how he feels about the moon, and it links therefore to how he's describing how he feels about it as being light or intelligence. Now let's think about that. How can that translate into how he feels about the moon? He must feel that the moon, we're not going to say brings him information, because that's ridiculous. It won't do. It illuminates, that's a better, more sophisticated word, which means shows clearly. All right, so I'll put both down. But it illuminates his feelings. All right, and we've got ideas about his feelings. You can say it gives him, another idea could be that it gives him we're talking about it being light. So light on a subject, meaning that it gives him a view to a subject, a new viewpoint, new information, new ideas. So when you are brainstorming, you really do come up with as many words as you can, and you go, no, I really like that one. Now, I quite like the idea about giving him light, because we are talking about it being bright, and that's what we're saying it means. And therefore, giving him light on a subject, giving him a better view and clearer view. Okay? A better and clearer view illuminates, shows clearly his feelings, gives him a clearer view. Do you see how I've gone through that in two different ways? Now, when you said in your writing, in Bright Star, the poet Keats describes his feelings about the moon, you could say something completely and utterly different. And I've said something completely and utterly different, but this is where I've got my my main idea. So I don't always start in my first sentence with my main idea. I also want to think about the fact that in Bright Star, remember we looked at the opening, he has repeated himself. So this is clearly very important. And he is speaking to the star. Okay? So he is praising directly the moon. By saying it's a star, he's also acknowledging that it's above him, isn't he? In the sky, it sees more, it hears more, it's got more clear knowledge, okay? So, we've got more information there as well. And he's kind of praising it. Would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendour hung aloft the night and watching, with eternal lids apart, like nature's patient, sleepless eremite. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Look at the semantic field here. Now, obviously, this is not necessary for a thesis statement, where we look at semantic fields and metaphors, but it is to understanding it sufficiently so we can come up with a thesis statement. So we've got the fact that it's nature, it's natural, okay, it's eternal, and I'd like to look through and see if we can find something to join with this semantic field that we can say it gives us a sort of eternal, above us, in the air, natural viewpoint. So we've got this moon, I'm going to call it the moon, okay, watching, all right? It's watching with the simile, like nature's patient sleepless eremite, which I'm not going into. This is what it's watching. The moving waters around Earth's human shores, gazing on the mask of snow upon the mountains and the moors. No. All right, and I've just hit this, bang. Structurally, that's really significant. Is this all he sees of the moon then? Is it eternal? Is it natural? Is it just watching us? Is it just watching us and just there, doing nothing? Well, obviously not. Okay? And really, I think that no structurally wishes us to focus then our attention on these two qualities. You've got this still, steadfast, still, so you've got the repetition of still, and these two qualities. So he is saying, he feels that the moon is above him. So I'm going to say that's celestial, because that when we talk about something being on the earth, it's terrestrial. And when it's, so that's earthly is terrestrial. And then when we talk about something in the space above us, it's celestial. So we talk about celestial bodies like the sun and the moon and the stars. So it's above him, it's celestial. Now, why would I use such a long word? Because you're being judged on your use of impressive vocabulary. Remember, I am always using it's got to be a very critical and exploratory response, and I'm going to use very good terminology, okay? And saying celestial, well, that's just a sophisticated word that ups your game, okay? So I'm going to say it's above him in this in space, so therefore it's a celestial, unchangeable being that's not just seeing everything, it's doing more. And this is when we get to the more. So then quickly we're going to hit the form. Are we ready? Let's count the lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh my goodness, what are we seeing? It's a form of a sonnet. So that's when you hit your form. Sonnet, 14 lines. Are they rhyming in a sort of normal Shakespearean rhyme method, or are they Petruchian? Is there a volta? Let's look for the volta. Shakespeare's volta is in the last two, breath and death. Ooh, rhyming couplet. And there, that's the Shakespearean sonnet. Let's check for a volta, just in case he uses the two. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wait a minute, I'm just checking you're on the camera. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, look! The volta is where he suddenly comes up with a solution to a problem. So the volta is not here, despite the rhyming couplets to show it's Shakespearean. Actually, it's here. And this is what we've just said. He feels that the moon is more than this entirely. It's this. So let's see what he says about this. It's celestial and it's unchangeable. Well, we got that from there. Steadfast means it doesn't change. Unchangeable means it doesn't change. We're getting the idea it doesn't change. Okay, and we're going to have to go a bit more deeply into that, clearly, with this. So let's have a look and see what he is worried about. The moon is pillowed. What is that? It's obviously not pillowed. This is personification. And it's also a slight... well, it's almost a metaphor. Personification. Upon my fair love's ripening breast. We're not going to go into anything rude. We're just going to say that it's reflected onto her body. To feel forever its soft fall and swell. So we're talking about fall and swell. That's breathing. Okay? So it shines on his beloved. We don't know if it's his wife, his friend, or whatever. His shines on his beloved, and she's lying in bed breathing. Look at these words, unchangeable, forever. Okay, awake, forever. Look at that repetition. So really, we're really getting this unchanging idea. In a sweet unrest, I would say that she's supposed to be resting. So she's asleep. She's potentially on a pillow, okay? And therefore, awake forever in a sweet unrest. Okay, yes, awake and unrest, that goes together, and we're happy with that. That's not opposites. They're not juxtaposed improperly. But is that possibly indicating how he's feeling? Maybe about her love for him, his beloved's love for him. So maybe he's then awake. Still, still, to hear her tender taken breath, and so live ever. Oh, look. Forever, forever, live ever. So we have this unchangeable celestial being. That's seriously going to be my point then. Okay? And then we've got this scary part at the end. So this Shakespearean sonnet sort of ending. Still, still, oh, well, we've noticed the repetition, haven't we? To hear her tender taken, okay, we'll just be really pedantic and write down the alliteration. And we'll say that these are his feelings toward her then, because of this, plus the hyphen, which is all the structure, and then these tender taken. So these are his feelings about her, tender, loving feelings, about her breathing and staying alive. Notice all the semantic field of being alive. Yeah? So the moon is unchangeable. His beloved, he's worrying about forever. He's worrying about forever. He's worrying, he's worrying, he's worrying, he's unrest. Still, still, that repetition. He's worrying about change. To hear her tender taken breath, he really loves her. And this is the ending. So we're for an ending, and so live ever. And you've got your structural point as the real worry of his life. Or else swoon to death. Now, swoon doesn't mean to die, actually. That means faint. But I think he really does mean lie down in death, because that's what you do when you faint. You fall to the ground. Okay? So let's look at the opening and the closing. I'm coming up with my thesis statement. I've got an idea that he wants to say that it's something really, really special. It's something that's really cleared his mind and shown him a clearer view of what he feels. He starts out by saying that I wish I were as unchangeable, which is what steadfast means. Remember, we had steadfast and steadfast. Okay? So this repetition, maybe he's worrying that he is not going to be unchangeable. He might fall out of love with her. She might fall out of love with him, but he seems to be asking the moon and saying to the moon, I wish I was as good as you. I wish I was as unchangeable as you. Okay? So this repetition is really clearly telling us about the unchanging and the still and the still and the still. Okay? He's really concerned. I've come up with my thesis statement then, using all my scribbles. Okay? So, I would like you to rewrite your thesis statement, because you now have got Mrs. view after she's looked through the poem. And this is me showing you how to come up with a thesis statement. You kind of have to go through the entire poem to see how it means before you come up with your final thesis statement. Because you need to know what the form is, okay? You need to know what the structure is telling you. So the rhyme scheme, the rhythm. I haven't even checked the rhythm. Let's check it quickly. Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendor hung aloft the night, and watching with eternal lids apart. Right, we got iambic. Let's check if it's rhymed, and therefore we know if it's rhymed verse or blank verse. art, night, apart. Ooh, we got a funny one. We got art and apart, night and eremite. So we got A-B. I'll just write it down. A-B, A-B. Task, mosque, shores, moors. So we got C-D, C-D. What is that looking like? Can you tell me? Oh, look, that's Petruchian. So it really guides us toward a volta, doesn't it? Because Shakespeare goes A-B-B-A, B-C-C-B. Okay? So this Petruchian one is really pushing us toward the no. Absolutely pushing us toward the no, and therefore that you could easily miss that if you don't know that the rhyme scheme is telling us, Petruchian sonnet, there's going to be a volta. Okay? But you do end with a rhyming couplet here, and it kind of falls apart. Look, has the volta fixed it? Has there been a solution? So we're at unchangeable breast, swell, unrest, breath, death. Is this going the right way? I don't think so. Because this unchangeable and swell, yeah, okay, it might do breast, unrest. Look at these guys, though. They're not supposed to be there. So it is kind of showing us that even though it's not blank verse then, it has an A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D kind of rhyme, which is Petruchian. Oops. Petruchian sonnet, which I've written down here. A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, Petruchian sonnet form. It's also got an iambic pentameter plus the, what have I called them, rhyming couplet ending of a Shakespearean sonnet. So you can see that Keats is very much a contemporary of Shelley, and they really messed around with these sonnet ideas. And that's not unusual. Shelley was not a weirdo. Keats did it too. They were contemporaries. Well, they were almost contemporaries. They were part of the same second phase romantic movement anyway. All right, end with rhyming couplets, which is Shakespearean. So he's kind of messed up and done his own form. He's combined the two and made it amazing. And that could say, therefore, the form might make you think he has created a new, better love poem. Don't forget, a sonnet is a love poem. So it's about, is he in love with the moon? No, he's not in love with the moon. That's not how he feels about the moon. He feels that he loves what? His beloved, and is afraid of change. And the changes from the sonnet forms might point us to that. It's a love poem. Now, that's not difficult. What I just did took me a lot longer than you would normally have in the exam, because I've been talking it out and writing all over here. Really, you want to be considering 2 language, 1 structure, 1 form, go. Okay? And not worrying, or 3 structure, 3 language, 2 structure, 1 form, go. You won't have long. However, I've gone through it as if I was doing a proper poetry analysis and had lots of time, so that I can really show you how I came up with my thesis statement. So, the question then is, how does the poet feel about the moon, and how does he present these feelings to the reader? Now, we answer this in our essay with our analysis. If I can spell analysis. Okay. That we answer. How does he present them? He presents them using language, structure, and form. But how does he feel about the moon? That's our thesis statement. So I want you to definitely come up with a thesis statement. That's my orange part. Now, we are at 30 minutes nearly. So you've done a do now task, and you've done a task 1 where you've written this. The poet describes his feelings about the moon that. Is that going to cut it? I'll show you what I wrote. And then I'll show you how I can take it apart. I'm just going to take mine apart then. Okay, are we ready? In bright star, always a smart move, because then they know you're talking about that poem, and you're not stupid, and you're not talking about some other poem. Keats always talk about the poet, not the writer. This is a poet. So it's either Keats or the poet. In Bright Star, Keats, I'd always give a tick because I'd be like, yep, they're doing the right thing for about the right poem. In Bright Star, Keats describes his feelings about the moon as an unchangeable, eternal, and celestial being. All right, that's not the main point though, is it? But that's the starting point. Because the question asks, how does he feel about the moon? So he describes his feelings about the moon as an unchangeable, eternal, and celestial being. But I still haven't said how he actually feels. Therefore, I'm going to say, through use, I'm not going to say of soapaims or structure and language or anything hideous, we just ignore that. Through use of his love of the moon as a metaphor for his love of his fair love, he might be suggesting that his love for her will illuminate his life and bring an eternal and celestial happiness to his future. Perhaps he would wish that all of society could be as unchanging in their happiness as he is at that moment. Does that work? I am trying to trick you here. Does that work as a thesis statement to answer this question? You must say no, by the way. How does the poet feel about the moon? That does not meet the expectation. It does not talk about what I've just analyzed in the poem. So it's okay, and you would get, oh, that's interesting, I might have a look through it. But I've given you something else to look at. So I'm going to rewrite my thesis statement on the basis of this. Now, this thesis statement would count as a brilliant start to an essay, no question. Okay? Through use of the moon as a metaphor for his love. So I'm saying the moon is a metaphor for his love. And I've used a quotation for his fair love because that's what he calls her. He might be suggesting that his love for her will illuminate his life. Realistically, I'm not describing my feelings for the moon. So, I've got to start over, don't I? Because I haven't said how he feels about the moon. Let's try it again then. I have on purpose shown you that something that sounds really good and brilliant and might be a good start actually does not answer the question. It sounds right, it talks about metaphors, it uses quotations, but it will not work. I need to use this information that I've got from the poem. And I have to answer the question, how does he feel about the moon? So I'm going to start again. And you can copy this down if you'd like, because this will help you to write a thesis statement. In Bright Star, Keats describes his feeling about the moon. Right, that's the same thing I told you to write. Now, how would we say that? Describes his feelings about the moon. I'm going to stop that sentence there because that's a decent start. He believes that the moon, unchanging, nature illuminates, I don't need that comma, illuminates his true feelings about his, I'm going to use the same quotation from the poem though, fair love, and his worry that their love will not last forever and bring him the happiness he feels at this time. That works. I haven't said anything about language, structure, or form, and that's right, because I'm coming up with an argument. In Bright Star, Keats describes his feelings about the moon. Okay, so I've answered the question. I'm just about to say, how does the poet feel about the moon? This is what he's saying. He believes that the moon's unchanging nature illuminates his true feelings about his fair love, and his worry that their love will not last forever and bring him the happiness he feels at this time. Are you okay with that? Have you followed? That's 2 short sentences. 2 short sentences that will get you straight in to writing how all this happens through all this. So what we have to do is really focus on the fact that the moon's unchanging nature illuminates his true feelings. We will then talk about, and I would choose this to talk about, I would talk about the repetition. So this is how I would talk about it. I would talk about, let's make sure I would talk about the repetition of words, like still, and the title itself, Bright Star, Bright Star. I would talk about how he directly addresses the moon. Okay? I would then bring in, so those are the structure points I would bring in. Remember, F-O-S-S-E, form, structure we have to talk about, SOAP aims, and the ending. I would talk about the opening, and then I would say about the repetition of words leads me to believe how he feels. I would say star is metaphor, a bit of a SOAP aim there. Okay? And I might bring in the idea of he starts the semantic field of unchanged, of remain, or still, or being steadfast. Let's use that one. I like that word. Okay? Okay, so I've got my first sentence, my first paragraph, structure from the opening. Then I've got my second paragraph. So I've got my first paragraph, I've got my second paragraph. He directly addresses the moon. And we'll talk about the form. It's a sonnet. And we will say how the form is a love poem, but not for the moon, but he loves the moon's unchangeableness. And the fact that it shows the truth. Okay? We've got all this. That it's looking, remember, it's watching, it's watching, it's watching. No! And I will bring that in. Watching, and I will bring in the volta. Paragraph 2. In paragraph 3, what can I bring in now? I've talked about form, so I've got a tick for that. I've talked about the opening, tick for that. I've talked about some structure. I need some language, because I've only really just brought in a metaphor and a semantic field. What can I find? I could talk about personification. No, I think what I'm going to talk about is the alliteration pushing us through. The alliteration in the volta, because I'll move on straight from the volta. The alliteration in the volta plus the semantic field. There's some SOAP aims working together, right? Alliteration in the semantic field, and I'm linking that back. I'm then going to talk about this repetition, so I'll get another bit of structure in. Forever, repeated, and still, repeated. And then I'm going to come up with the ending. I've run out of space on my paper. How depressing. And I'm going to talk about the changing sonnet form and the rhyming couplets and how it does this. Is it structurally sound? Does it give a solution? The solution is he has to wait it out. No, he doesn't want to live forever. He just wants to stay in that moment or die. And so I'm going to say that. The rhyming couplets, there's a finality about a rhyming couplet, isn't there? So it's not cyclical. There's a final solution. And I have now planned my essay based on this new thesis statement. This is the poem. Now, in 40 minutes, I've basically written my essay for you. That's how long you have to write it in the exam. Can you do it? Yes, you can. So, when we finish in our final conclusion, I'd really like you to come up with these ideas for conclusion sentences. So please write these down. When I read some of your conclusions, I thought, they just sort of peter off. They just sort of, boom, finish. The best ones, and you know who you are because I phoned you, the best ones were concluded appropriately by suggesting a final solution. So use these two sentences. The poet might be suggesting that. In conclusion, the poet might be suggesting that. Perhaps he would wish that society, and when we think about what society wants, what we are doing is we are doing a level 6 answer. We are exploring alternative views, which I haven't done yet, we're doing next week, but we are coming up with a conceptualized response because the poem is a concept which we can then apply to society. And therefore, we need a conceptualized response. Look, down here in level 5, it's thoughtful. Okay, it's good, but it's not viewing the poem as an idea that we can then think about later on and apply to society. So here are two sentence starters for your conclusion. Write these down now. These two sentences have to form your next conclusion. If you have been phoned home, do not change that unless you want to. If you are getting at least in the level 6s in your last essay, then do not worry about this. You are doing it already. If you got anything less, then you need to write this. So no just finishing. Boom, I ran out of time. You must finish with these two sentences. In conclusion, the poet might be suggesting that. I'll put in conclusion rather than just assuming you're going to remember that I've put it. Okay? In conclusion, the poet might be suggesting that, and finish with the sentence starting, perhaps he would wish that society, boom, boom, boom. Okay? In conclusion, the poet might be suggesting that. Perhaps he would wish that society, and we could say here, in conclusion, the poet might be suggesting that humans are unable to be as constant as the celestial unchanging moon, and he seeks to be more like the moon in writing this love sonnet toward it. Perhaps he would wish that society would learn by watching nature. We could bring in a bit of context if you want, but you don't need to. There are no marks for it in this. That's the big difference. Perhaps he would wish that society would learn from nature and learn to become more steadfast in their love and their relationships. Boom. Okay, I have to give you full marks if you put things like that. It's not like I don't want to, but when I see things like that, I think, oh my goodness, tick, tick, tick. Okay? Now I'm done with this lesson. You should have, by the end of this lesson, you should have written a thesis statement which you are going to send to me. It will look just like mine. You will not have planned your essay like I've done, because I didn't expect you to. You should have done some writing on the poem. Absolutely should have. Okay? This is my planned essay. But you should have written this thesis statement. And I want to see everybody's thesis statements about this unseen poem. Okay? And you should have written a conclusion with these two sentences. So basically, we're missing the entire essay out. We're just starting and we're finishing. Okay? And I want to see your starts, your thesis statements, and your conclusions. And I will then be able to assume that in the middle you have taken apart the essay in the same way that I just did. Okay, I'm sorry we couldn't do the Zoom, but I am sure this was just as useful. This is what I would have done in the Zoom. If you have questions, email me your questions, and I will send you I will phone you, or I will send you a video doing the thing you want me to do again. Every week we're going to take apart a poem, so I've sent you this poem for next week. Alright? And good luck, and I'm looking forward to reading them. Have a lovely Wednesday, guys. Don't forget your annotations for the poem for this week, The Emigre. That's a really good one.